think they're tremendous.
Is it strange to see your words translated into pictures?
Yes, it is, and I think in this particular case, the artist has absolutely caught the essence of, of the piece you've just been reading. I think he's got any Weetok atoll where the H-bomb was tested, and where the story is about a sort of modern Robinson Crusoe who comes ashore on the 20th century's desert island, which I think of as somewhere like Bikini or any Weetok. The end of technology, the end of industrial man in a way. I think he's done it brilliantly.
I must be right to call you a science fiction writer, mustn't I?
Right. No, I'm proud to be a science fiction writer. I believe science fiction is, the true literature of the 20th century. The paradox is that it's always been regarded as slightly sort of not really respectable. I think, people say to me, are you a science fiction writer? As if, a slightly illicit activity, which is a shame. But I firmly believe in it.
You almost believe, don't you, that modern novelists slightly cop out to their responsibility by writing books about the emotions only?
Yes, I think that's true. I think the sort of tremendous changes are taking place and have done, say, over the last 20, 30 years, which have transformed people's lives in a way they aren't really aware of on a day-to-day basis. But anybody who can look back, say, 10 years even, to the mid-60s, let alone 30 years, can see that life has, the clothes we wear, the food we eat, the way we furnish our houses, our lives themselves have been totally transformed by science and technology. And now I think we're, up to the present, most great technological changes, say, during the last 100 years have been visible ones. People have been able to see the arrival of electric light and cars and the Queen Mary being launched and so on, aviation. But now we're moving into an area which is a bit more disquieting, I think, because we're moving into the area of invisible technologies, particularly computers, and the whole sort of movement of information about us. We can't see what's going on, and that is where I think the science fiction writer has a vital role to play in alerting people to what are now invisible hazards, if you like.
But then, if you are alerting us, you should have some qualifications for that.
Well, my qualifications are that I'm living in 1977. Science. What the science fiction writer is somebody who responds to a particular set of changes around him, and I think the sort of changes I'm talking about, not all of which are sort of fearful ones. Science has brought a huge cornucopia of possibilities, excitements, interests, and at the same time as it's brought, potential hazards. But my job is to respond to the world in which I live, and I see science and technology as the transforming factors.
But I've thought of, I've read things like science fiction writers and science fiction addicts have conferences, don't they? And I've always imagined, begging your pardon, that they're full of nutcases.
Well, there's one taking place this weekend, so I won't be going to it. I actually am not very popular at them. But no, this is a huge subculture that most people are unaware of. Their conferences take place all over the world, particularly in the United States. I think they're really rather bizarre places because everybody, they all dress up in futuristic uniforms. They have sort of futuristic jousting matches.
What, like sort of Doctor Who or what?
Right. Oh yeah, and even more extravagant. Absolutely. They're a very strange sort of fringe group that, with great intensity and on the edge of some kind of, I think, almost a sort of a scientifically based religion. That sounds...
What are they getting their kicks from science fiction, and what do you mean then when you say that?
Well, science fiction gives them an image of the world. It's also, I think, a lot of the fans, these hardcore fans, are people with how can I put it without... with a rather limited hold on the world, the real world. And the science fiction gives them access to a world of gigantic power and authority. All of time and space come into their suddenly come into their control via science fiction. They have a world picture which is total, literally. I mean, it embraces the whole cosmos, all of time. And they get a sort of, almost a sort of a sense of, tremendous sense of reassurance and a kind of, a sort of mystical and religious identity with the sort of unseen powers of the universe.
But you said you weren't accepted by them. Are you saying that you cut yourself off from that that's not how you think of it yourself?
Well, I don't write that kind of science fiction. I mean, up till a few years ago, science fiction was outer space, interplanetary travel, time machines, Star Trek. I mean, the Star Trek people are a complete, are a sort of separate bunch of. I mean, in the States recently, there was a Star Trek convention, and about 3,000 people turned up. In Los Angeles, I mean, the Star Trek fans live in a Star Trek world. Literally, they've redecorated and furnished their homes like the control room of the Enterprise. They wear Star Trek uniforms at home. Some of them, I've been told, in Los Angeles, have sought plastic surgery to have their ears flame-tipped, like Mr. Spock.
Oh, how
I mean, I've received letters from these people, and the top half of the letter is in huge red letters from the log of the Starship Enterprise. Underneath, in the smallest black letters you could get, the actual address, 12345 Pasadena Boulevard. And the letter itself is couched as a message from, a spaceship, as if they're sort of writing to me from sort of the millions of, miles beyond the galaxy. I mean, they're extraordinary people.
But have you never written that kind of book about other planets? You must have.
No, I haven't. No, I think almost all my fiction is set in the present day. I'm writing a science fiction about the present day because that's where the science fiction is now. It's around us.
I'll be candid with you. I'll tell you something that happened to me, which is that I had not read much science fiction. I had read Harlan Ellison because I was going to interview him. I did. I'd read The Triffids Man, John Wyndham. I read H.G. Wells, and I suppose Orwell, 1984, would be regarded, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And then I started to read you, and then started to talk to you last week, if you remember when we met. And I still felt a little bit, what on earth are you going on about, in a way? Why are you out to frighten me, or why are you out to tell me things about these things which are implausible, I thought, right? And then I left you, and it was very odd. I watched a programme on the telly, which I would not have bothered to watch, perhaps, because I might have turned it off, about genetic engineering. And it scared the living daylights out of me, and I thought, this is what J.G. Ballard is warning us about. Am I right or wrong?
Right. Of course. Can I just pick you up on one small point? I mean, not all my science fiction is frightening. I mean, I'm interested in the good side.
Yeah.
The good side of science as well as the bad. But I mean, if you're writing basically cautionary tales, I mean, you can't visualize 1984 with a happy ending. It would be rather peculiar. So there is a tendency in science fiction for it to be to hold up a warning finger. But it's not a downbeat, pessimistic fiction. It's full of optimism, actually.
Yeah, but let me go back to genetic engineering, which is something which, as I say, I don't suppose I'd have looked at with quite such attention. And suddenly I was very frightened by the fact that scientists are going into something which could get out of control.
Yes, that's true. I mean, it's a curious paradox that people will watch science programs on television and be stirred by them, disturbed by them, and yet not want to read a science fiction that is making exactly the same points. I think that's part of the legacy of SF as a sort of pulp medium. It's a shame because it began, in the hands of people like H.G. Wells. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, Orwell's 1984. These are major science fiction writers who are among the most important writers of this century. It's a pity that it got into the hands of, the sort of Buck Rogers brigade.
Why do you think women don't like it? Because on the whole, women do not, by the way.
I think that's true. I think women are, in a way, too mature. They're too practical. They're too... I think they regard a lot of science fiction as rather childish. Also, I think their women's imaginations express themselves in terms of their emotions, and...
That's not a bad thing.
No, that's fine, but it only goes so far. And I think
But you see, I think what I perhaps want to do is that I put my head in the sand a little bit, because I don't want to hear that the world might be absolutely foul, for if not for my children, for my grandchildren.
Well, all right. I can see that. I mean, you don't want to hear the bad news, right? But part of the job of science fiction is to alert people, is to warn people of what may happen. I mean, so many of science fiction's prophecies have come true. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, most of the preoccupations today about pollution, overpopulation, fears, as you say, about genetic engineering are sort of very ambiguous feelings about things like organ transplant, surgery, or actual manipulation of the sort of of genetic material, where you can sort of marry virus. You can marry a bacteria to sort of animal cells. I mean, most of these science fiction's prophecies have come true to a large extent. It's quite extraordinary, and I think it's got this important job to do, which it mustn't flinch from.
I expect it's too easy a thing to say to you, but because on the back of your book I read that you'd been interned in a Japanese concentration camp.
Well, civilian POW camp.
Yeah.
Right, during World War II.
Yeah, as a child.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that helped you as a science fiction writer to think of things? I don't know. It just occurred to me that it might have done.
Well, I was born in China and lived there until I was repatriated when I was 16. And I mean, England seems a very cosy, and still is, a very cosy part of the world. That was the landscape of the Far East is a very sort of dramatized landscape.
Which you use in your books, very often.
Which dramatized in a way it's difficult to find in England. I mean, England is very much, the land of rolling English meadows, and it's not really, to be honest, the landscape of England until very recently hasn't, inspired me, to put it mildly, because I thought sort of the largest engagements of politics and the climate of this planet even, and if you aren't found here. I remember in 1946 when we docked at Southampton, looking down at these sort of small grey streets and thinking, my God, the place it's so small, so tired, and so sort of defeated. I mean, this was the country that had won the war, or helped to win the war. I mean, I remember along the sides of the streets there were these little black perambulators, which I thought were sort of mobile sort of coal scuttles used for bunkering ships. In fact, they were cars, English cars. I'd never seen a car like that. But it amazed me that anybody could design something like that. It took me a long time it took England a long time. It wasn't really until 1965 until things began to move here. And it was a tremendous, the 60s were a tremendously liberating period.
Let me go back to your prison camp experiences, though. Did it affect you terribly as a child? I mean, how difficult is it to accept that kind of?
Well, I mean, the camp, I was there, we were interned for about 3 years. I think the adults had a very unpleasant time. But I mean, the strange thing is, I was, if I was being honest, I was quite happy there. I mean, it's, if children are together with enough other children, they enjoy themselves, even if their feet, shoes are falling off and they're running around in rags. And I think if they're starving, you can be hungry for a very long period. And if you're playing games with other children, you don't notice it. This is the strange thing. I think it was tough for the adults.
But then didn't you feel the tension of the adults in the camp?
Yes, it was quite obvious that, I don't want to say that. There was a great deal of solidarity there. I mean, this was a camp of 2,000 people, mostly families, parents with children. And it was like the sort of ultimate nuclear family. I mean, there was this great sense of solidarity. Everybody was, together. Yes, I was aware of it. I mean, the activities of the Japanese and the sort of confrontation with the inmates and the sort of bizarre sort of thing goings on. I mean, every time somebody escaped, the Japanese, they wouldn't do anything. All they did was call a curfew and then close the school, so that all the all the children were sort of stuck in these small rooms with their parents, driving them out of their minds.
Punishment for the parents.
Right,
certainly,
right.
yes.
Very, sort of fiendishly subtle.
Right.
But I mean, I didn't notice. So I was driving my parents mad. But because I was playing, it was a huge tenement in a sense, and having a good time with all the other children. The camp was home. When I left the camp after 3 years and went back to my parents' house in Shanghai, that seemed very weird. All the rooms seemed so vast. It was like a sort of nightmare. I remembered the camp as, it was a very happy and friendly place. Curiously, a lot of British people stayed on in the camp long after, I think something like 9 months or a year, or even more possibly. After the war had ended, people were still living in the camp. They enjoyed it.
Why?
They were getting American rations. They were riding around in jeeps. But they liked the sort of strange logic at work, but it gave them security. I suppose 3 years had been enough to institutionalize them.
But were you short of food? Were you short of supplies? Were you short of...
Within the camp?
Yes.
Well, the food got... I've only got sort of few memories that... obviously the food got steadily worse. We lived on sort of boiled rice, warehouse sweepings, and something called cracked wheat, I think, which is an animal feed. I remember this rice was full of weevils, and we used to push them to the side of the soup plate. And I remember finally I had 3 rows of weevils around the edge of the plate. It sounds amazing. And then my father, who was a trained scientist, businessman, said, look, from now on we eat the weevils, and we did.
The lesser of two weevils. Are you hopeful as a science fiction writer for our society?
Yes, yes, of course. Though I may hold up a cautionary finger, I feel that science and technology, on the whole, are sort of forces for good. They've completely transformed our lives in every way, and it's very easy to be unnecessarily alarmed. At the same time, one's got to be cautious.
Do you write sometimes to remind yourself of things?
What? Do I recreate my past? Not consciously, though I dare say I do.